Greetings, YouTube. So Alex Jones has popped up on Metafilter, the big blue again, and people are discussing the whole concept of censorship and free speech. So I thought I'd throw my 2 cents in here. Now, I think that maybe the crux of this whole problem is that many people are viewing social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, uh, Instagram, Tumblr, comment sections in any newspaper or article anywhere in the world. They're viewing them as public spaces. Now, ignoring the fact that if you're an American, some of these sites are hosted outside the United States, so that would actually put them outside the purview of U.S. constitutional consideration. Um, Free speech can only be infringed by the government. Censorship can be applied by anyone that is the platform or publisher of a piece of information. So a newspaper can decide we're not going to publish this article for whatever reason. That is a form of censorship. Okay? If YouTube decides that certain comments or certain types of videos should be deleted from their platform, that is censorship. But neither of those cases is an infringement of free speech because they're not being done by the government. They're being done by private entities. And when it comes to social media, someone has to host this stuff. There is a server someplace that has this information on it. Now, it could be yours. There are people who run their own servers and host their own material. Then you can decide what happens to that. But you, the owner of that server, the person hosting the material on that server, is still not the government. It is still in private hands. Excuse me. And that information can be censored by you if you chose, but it still is not being censored by the government. We don't have a public digital space in America. I'm not sure if anyone has a public digital space, the digital equivalent of me physically leaving my house, going to a public square, and speaking. That's free speech in its most basic form. You are standing on public property and you are speaking. Now, there are still limitations to free speech, and I've discussed this in the past. You cannot foment violence against someone. We have libel and defamation and clauses and things like that. You cannot yell fire in a theater, that kind of things. There are limitations on free speech, which the general public have agreed are reasonable. Okay? But people like Alex Jones, who are spewing hate, who are spewing disinformation, who are spewing fabricated controversies and conspiracy theories, that information must be hosted on someone's server. And whoever owns those servers gets to decide what that information is, if it gets stored, if it gets disseminated. The problem up till now is that there have been many platforms that were willing to spew his vile rhetoric to the point where there is a couple whose 6-year-old child was murdered in school, who have been hounded so many times they have had to move 7 times. 7 times they've had to move, and now live in a secured community, like a gated community, just to keep the people away from them that are harassing them because of Alex Jones, whose unfounded conspiracy is that their 6-year-old child wasn't actually murdered, that it's all a lie. And these people can no longer live in the same town as their child's grave. They cannot visit their child's grave. And every time they move, up until now at least, they have been harassed and their personal information has been released by followers of this shit-gibbon Alex Jones. And people allowed him to continue to say it. AM radio to begin with, then eventually numerous platforms on the internet. And it's until the government infringes his speech, his free speech has not been impacted. He has been censored because the people that own this servers are starting to get pushback from the public. They're starting to realize that there are a whole lot of people that think that this idiot really shouldn't be spewing lies and hate over every available airway and making innocent people's lives utterly devastated. And he can still walk out of his house, go to the public square, and spew his insanity if he wants. And until the government steps on him, his free speech hasn't been impacted. And if social media platforms have decided that we don't need this type of thing on our servers, on our private property, we're going to have to listen to things like this. And there are too many social media platforms that are willing to be disseminators of controversies and white supremacy and Islamophobia and transphobia and homophobia. Too many mainstream media outlets that legitimize this speech and spread it, as opposed to shutting it down and shoving the Nazis back into the closet where they belong. And people like Alex Jones are ruining lives, real living people's lives, not theoretical people, not crisis actors, not some part of a government conspiracy. Real people's lives are being ruined because he feels he has the right to ruin them. And social media platforms can say, no. Go into the public square, but we're not going to host your vile rhetoric. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with us not having child porn in every particular venue that it wants to be put on. I'm okay with not legitimizing Nazis and Christian fundamentalists that want to wipe out Muslims in America, and homophobes, and transphobes, and misogynists, and people spewing toxic masculinity. I'm okay if we shut these people down and make them go to the park and talk to each other, because it means their rhetoric will not be spread, and we can move forward, we can progress, as opposed to where we are now, mired in this insanity and filth.